I would like to greet you all on my own behalf and on behalf of the Center for Social Justice at Stellenbosch University. A special greeting to the Chief Justice. So I do work in social justice and I am very careful about not elevating anyone above others. As indicated, I'm here to present on what combating corruption seriously. In other words, I'm drawing a relationship between good governance and combating corruption as part of pushing back against corruption against all countries. Incidentally, today being International Anti-Corruption Day, colleagues are gathering all over the world to talk about corruption. I am a member of the International Anti-Corruption every 2 years. It's a global conference. And as we were preparing for this one that is taking place currently in Washington, we asked ourselves, with all of these conferences and all of these efforts, including money that is being pumped into, it is against that background that I have decided to talk about the relationship between corruption and governance and why accountability, beyond accountability for corrupt awareness to all, it does this by skewing the benefits of social cooperation in favor of those that use or benefit from the use of entrusted power for personal gain, thus undermining the equal enjoyment of all rights and freedoms, is also a crime whose impact primarily undermines democracy, making it a major threat to the rule of law, justice, sustainable democracy, and peace. Corruption, at the center of which is a polarized world and the climate justice crisis. In a paper that I presented recently to the World Congress to push back more meaningfully against corruption, we have to rethink democracy, re-democratize democracy, because the thing we call democracy has lots and lots of tyrannical practices. In Athens, looked to democracy was to end tyranny. It was to end the social injustice where a small group decided for everyone, split the burdens unevenly, and the benefits of social cooperation unevenly, giving itself the lion's share. So democracy was supposed to make sure that nobody gets the lion's share of benefits and no group gets a donkey's share of burdens. Spoke about really the focus being rethinking democracy and re-democratizing it. I contrasted in South Africa the day when Nelson Mandela met with the people of Sharpeville on 10 December. We just adopted our constitution, and he spoke about never again. I'm not going to give. He promised them that the fruits of struggle were going to soon be experienced by then. Has anybody been to Sharpeville recently? You don't have to go to Sharpeville. Just the camping there. Sorry, Chief Justice, because I know with the Constitutional Court you're not the public protector, where you can do an own investigation. Those people were victims of apartheid, that they were going to get certain benefits. They're now camping there for those benefits. Why are things like that important? Let's go back to corruption. So on the one hand, we are saying corruption is related to good governance, and then we have a situation in Cornhill where people are seemingly asking for things that are for corruption. Here's the deal. A lot of the times when we fight against corruption, the very people that have stolen from our people, the very people that stole money for PPEs. I thought I'd seen it all when I had to investigate a theft of money. A colleague from the US spoke about how thugs stole money meant for victims of September 11 and to repay institutions. But when COVID hit us, and people stole now as we move forward with our democracy, that some people are implicated in PPE money theft will get support. So ask yourself, why do people get support? It is because the fruits of ending corruption is in order to have a better life. Corruption, according to Kofi Annan, when he introduced the UN Convention Against Corruption, is an insidious plague that has erodes the quality of life and allows organized crime, terrorism, and other threats to humanity to flourish. This evil phenomenon is found in all countries, big and small, rich and poor. But it is the developing world that its effects undermining a government's ability to provide basic services, feeding inequality and injustice, economic and discouraging foreign aid and investment. Corruption is a key element in economic underperformance and a major obstacle to poverty alleviation. So the average person does not realize that corruption, particularly corruption such as state capture, is at the heart of democracy. But even small corruption such as bribing a traffic officer, such as bribing a home affairs officer. But secondly, often the reason people participate in corruption is because democracy is rigged. There's no democratic access to opportunities, to resources, to privileges, to benefits. And there's this, whether we're talking women, people with disabilities, ethnic minorities in certain countries, and in this country, the majority of black people are sitting like Sharpeville people and saying, when will the unequal distribution of power between black and white people be addressed? When will the unequal distribution of and those who own the means of production be addressed? And then I talked to you about some of the corruption scandals in the world. 25, we feature among them. Why is the Gupta scandal important? It's because how the Guptas worked with the Zuma family to capture the heart of democracy is something that should horrify every South African. Every South African should worry not just about, every South African would say, we voted for people to go to parliament, to make laws, to then select among them the best to become the executives, and those to then have a public service. We expected that everything would be done evenly. Why were they not worried? You remember when we did the investigation as Power Protector, the Guptas and the Zuma family hired a PR firm in London to come up with a campaign on what strike a chord with some of our middle class people. So why did it do so? Because people are feeling that the system is still rigged. I just want to talk to you very quickly. But at the core of corruption is systemic governance failure. And so part of it is grievance. Studies have been shown that when people are maintaining those rules, and there's even quotes, I've got one about when the law is unjust, then but it is at the risk of becoming what they call a Potemkin constitution, which is a charade, a beautiful village that was built that didn't exist. It was a portable village. Somebody built a village to just many, including including Justice. A justice of the Supreme Court of the US. It's quoted in the EU courts. Our constitutional court has been to make sure that there's accountability. So we have rule ambiguity in certain cases, home affairs rules where people are not able to get what they read. Section 84 of our Constitution. Section 84 of our Constitution gives our president powers, and these are the powers that says 84(2)(b), referring bills back to the National Assembly for consideration of the bills constitutionally. Why is it that Chapter 5 of the Equality Act is still not implemented? It was never referred to Parliament. It was never referred to the Constitutional Court for Constitutionality. It's sitting there. We talk about the president of the country and one family captured the state. And I don't think it was about money. I think it was about subverting the rule of law. So I have no quarrels with that, and I think we have to be implemented. And then we are all together now having a democratic crisis because our democracy is not delivering as required. So there must be both accountable. So Nelson Mandela said even the most benevolent of countries, of governments, has within it people with propensities for human failings. And that's why we wouldn't be having the people of Sharpeville still waiting for their life to look better. We wouldn't be having the Kulumani women at Cornhill. So what do we need to do is re-democratize democracy, a social democracy. So who should we be looking for answers? Sweden, Denmark, and all of those countries that are social democracies. And that's all the divisions of the past and establish a society based on democratic values, social justice, and fundamental human rights, where every citizen's life is improved and every person's potential is improved. And then democratic values. So we should be seeing more democratic governance, different from what we saw under apartheid in Ceylon. We should be seeing a progressive move towards social justice. We should be seeing an advancement of human rights for everyone, equal enjoyment of human rights for everyone, which is a requirement, which we are enjoined to do according to the Constitutional Minister of Labour. To those in government, I'm going to say to you, let's stop having the mistake in favor of equality and in favor of the poor. You can look at all of those socioeconomic rights cases. The TAC, we're not governing constitutionally some of the time. Not some, a lot of the time we are, but some of the times. And we need to remember that justice is essential for societies, Adam Smith, so that ever elegant and economical must be rejected or revised if it's untrue. Likewise, laws and institutions, no matter how efficient and well arranged, must be reformed or up economy. It's a social enterprise. People get into a country for their welfare. Money or the economy is supposed to be used efficiently and effectively for the welfare of everyone. And John Rawls says it's unjust to say the majority can suffer so that a few can survive. Or a minority can survive. Is that when we think about accountability, let's not confine our accountability for transgressions. I am concluding that, Chief Justice, one of the reasons state capture was enabled was because of the fault lines in our democratic project. To greed, but the system needed to hold. So to make the system hold, here's what I'm putting forward. One, let's start with constitutional governance. Let no one feel like the hunchback of Sparta and feel that if this democracy is not working for me, then I don't care who steals it. And social justice and fundamental human rights, where everyone's potential is freed and every citizen's life is improved. So those 5 things, let's see them starting. So what do? We need stronger accountability, and here's what I'm suggesting for stronger accountability: whistleblower protection. A whole lot of whistleblower, including Williams, who's now of the finalization of a new Protected Disclosures Act with a broader ambit, but more importantly, making sure that whistleblowers do not suffer financial loss unnecessary. As part of that, I'm recommending also that we professionalize investigators. Investigators decide the fate of our nation, the fate of individuals, but they is regulated, but the investigators are not part of any profession as investigators. And I think that is extremely important that those institutions I'm also going to propose something that I learned from the constitutional lawyers that we gathered. One of the reason things are slowing down when it comes to constitutional governance is that a lot of people do not understand the meaning of some of the provisions of our Constitution. And the Constitutional Court has helped with constitutional court cases. The Commission could then unpack all of the jurisprudence and say, according to Finance versus Van Heerden, according to the Constitutional Court, once you have just heard that there's something wrong that's happening, you don't even have to go to Section 34(1) of PRECA. Minister of told that something is going wrong, it's your duty to act. So that would have to be then integrated in the law. I'm also suggesting that this Venice-style commission should plug the gap between the role, but who then makes sure that there's a follow-up on remedial action? Who makes sure that they assist Parliament in unpacking? And for this, I'm grateful to Honourable Zinoli for in the residency. Something is happening too. I also suggest that we simplify PRECA. It had already been flagged by the team as a perpetrator. It's one of what does this mean right now? But for me, it's just what is corruption? We need every child to know that corruption goes beyond bribery. We need everyone to know that at the core of corruption is exchange of favors in a manner that be giving your child a tender, giving your child a share in a company, giving you a holiday abroad. This but we need to simplify it. A law is useless if people don't know when it's being transgressed. Laws are important to shape the thinking in society, to add to the values of society. And therefore the Venice Commission could also have, the Venice Commission is not about corruption, it's about constitutional governance and accountability, pulling everything together and making sure that Parliament is assisted. And if you want to read about the Venice Commission, you can do center of our anti-corruption quest, and also place social justice. Let's tell people that corruption is a violation of social justice. State capture being the most odious form of corruption blatantly undermined democracy. And we're still struggling to rebuild institutions of democracy. And lastly, let's institutionalize knowledge about democracy. And I end with supporting my colleague and former, if we don't get that, we will not make progress on many issues around implementing our beautiful Constitution, and it will continue to be seen by others as a Pocampton village. Thank you.
I think that deserves another round of applause, please. Professor Tuli, thank you so much for not only spending the time with us, but also for reminding us that corruption is really a social injustice. And for reminding us that corruption is a crime that can seriously risk the explanation of what needs to be done to strengthen accountability, because we understand now, and we've learned to come to understand in South Africa, that the moment you have weakened governance practices or weakened accountability, that creates a fertile environment for corruption to fester. And I don't think there is corruption on society than our own Chief Justice. Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, during his 4 years as the chairperson of the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, he witnessed firsthand the eye-watering extent of corruption in South Africa. We are so pleased, Chief Justice, to have you with us today. And before I welcome you to the stage, Raymond Zondo was born in Nampo in KwaZulu-Natal, and he is married, still happily married with his wife and 4 children. We believe he's happily married after state captures 4 years. He attended the St. Mary Seminary, where he matriculated. He studied law at the University of Zululand and then later at the University of South Africa. He holds the University of Natal, and then he holds 3 LLMs, all of them from the University of South Africa. The first cum laude in labour law, his second was specialisation in commercial law, and then he even holds an LLM degree in patent law. So Justice Zondo served part of his articles under the late Mrs. Victoria Mthenge, in the latter to Mthembu and Partners, and later to Channels Alberton Attorneys. After admission as an attorney, he became a partner in the Durban law firm, Mate and Zondo Incorporated, in which he practiced for a number of years before he was appointed as a judge. Born in 1992, Justice Zondo served in 2 committees of the Commission of Inquiry regarding the prevention of public violence and intimidation, which investigated violence in South Africa during the early 1990s. For those of us who are a little bit younger, I see there are young people in the audience, that is commonly known as the drafting of the Labour Relations Bill for post-apartheid South Africa. With certain amendments, that bill was later passed as the Labour Relations Act of 1995. In 1996, he was appointed as the first chairperson of the governing body of the CCMA, for which position he resigned upon being appointed as a judge. With effects from February 1997, Justice Zondo was a writer. Early 1999, he was appointed as the judge of the then Transvaal Provincial Division of the High Court in Pretoria, and with effect from August in that same year, he was appointed as the acting judge president of the Labour Appeal Court and Labour Court. Shortly thereafter, in May 2000, he was appointed as the judge president for the Labour Appeal and the Labour Court, and that is where he is established by the heads of court. These included a committee chaired by Chief Justice Pius Langa at the time, which drew up a document to be used by the judiciary in dealing with complaints about racism and sexism in the judiciary. He also served in committees chaired by Justice President Ngwebe, which was established by the heads of court to organize the first and second conferences of official languages in court. After completing his term of office as Judge President in 2010, Justice Zondo returned to the North Gauteng Division of the High Court and resumed his duties as a judge of that court. With effect from 1 November 2011, Justice Zondo was appointed as the acting judge of the Constitutional Court until 31st of May 2012, and 2017 Justice Zondo was appointed as the Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa. But then we all know in January 2018, many things changed when he was appointed as the chairperson of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption and fraud in the public sector, including organs of state. Effective from 1 April 2022, Justice Zondo was chapters in 3 books. In March 2011, Justice Zondo was honoured by the KZN Legal Forum, consisting of many legal bodies, with an award for his contribution to human rights realisation in South Africa. And on top of all these remarkable achievements, Justice Zondo currently serves as the Chancellor of his alma mater, the University of Zululand. Ladies and gentlemen,
you may be seated. Thank you very much. So my daughter Figeni, I'm sorry, Chairperson of the Public Service Commission, and commissioners, Mr. S.L. Zinoli, Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Professor Thuli Madonsela, Law Professor, University of Stellenbosch, and former Public Protector, Mr. Directors General in attendance, Advocate Motibi, Special Investigative Unit, Advocate A. Johnson, Head Investigating Directorate, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. It is for me a great honor and privilege to be part of this conference this afternoon and to have been invited to address you. I do hope that you had a very successful at the cost of failure of governance and ethics in the public service, a response to the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption and fraud in the public sector, including organs of state. I take this Commission's Office on Drugs and Crime for inviting me to be part of this conference. The program reflects my topic as, and I quote, reflecting on the impact of corruption on society and the role of the judiciary, close quotes. Since I handed over the last parts of the report of the State Capture Commission to the President of the Republic on 22 June 2022. It also takes place just over a month after President Ramaphosa addressed the nation on his response to the State Capture Commission. Interestingly, it also takes place on the 9th of December 2022, which is exactly 1 month short of 5 years since President Zuma announced the establishment of the State Capture Commission and my appointment as its chairperson on 9 January 2018. Appointment of the Commission. For 3 years, from August 2018 to August 2021, South Africans were able to watch the proceedings of the Commission and to hear all the evidence on state capture, corruption and fraud in the public sector. It has been said that the Commission was a mirror in which we as South Africans were able to see ourselves. If the face we saw in that mirror was our face, then, quite frankly, we are ugly. Because in that mirror, we saw the real face of state capture, corruption, and fraud in our country. I must address you on the impact of corruption on society and the role of the judiciary. But I hope that Professor deal with some of the matters that I think are important in addition to dealing with the matter that has been reflected in the program. It is easy for one to use the work of the Commission to talk about the impact of months since I presented to the President the last parts of the report of the Commission. And I propose to refer to on society. And it seems to me that probably the best place to start with in the context of the evidence that was heard by the Commission is that PRASA, state entity that was established in order to provide very essential transport to the people of. But PRASA has not been able to provide a safe and reliable transport, and corruption and maladministration and incompetence and mismanagement have a lot where, as corruption was raging over a number of years, the Portfolio Committee on Transport in Parliament, which had a constitutional duty, not interested in overseeing what was happening at PRASA, and was not interested in asking very pertinent questions in order to turn around from what I've said in the Commission's report on PRASA. PRASA is the state entity where a board that was committed to fight corruption, state entity where the chairperson of that board, who was determined to fight corruption and who is a veteran of the ruling party, went to the top 6 of the ruling party. Please help me. They did not help you. PRASA is the entity where took files and took them to the Hawks, many files, laid criminal complaints, and asked the Hawks to investigate. To date, the Hawks have not finished their investigation. PRASA is the entity where this board that I'm talking about, that was committed to find about the investigations, went to court to force the Hawks to do their job. And when those efforts, PRASA is the entity where Professor Madonsela, as public protector, issued that report called Derailed, which contained, but as at the time that I was writing my report, my information was that the recommendations that had been made in that report, or at least many of them, had not been implemented. To ask the question, why not? PRASA is the entity where for 6 years there was no permanent CEO, and the various ministers of a CEO was appointed in 2021, February or March. And then before the end of 12 months, he was suspended and later dismissed. When he took his dismissal, valid reason for him to be dismissed. and said it looked like there was some other agenda why he was dismissed. And he ordered that he be reinstated. He was not reinstated. He was then dismissed for another reason. An acting CEO has been appointed. Another acting CEO has been appointed. The question arises, why these very strange fissures at PRASA? It went up from 500 million in the first year, I think up to about 20 billion after 5 years. And it was like there was nobody asking the questions, why do you not? People who are supposed to sit with that PRASA operates properly are not doing their job. Because they don't do their job, the people suffer. Because that it had been discovered that I think there were more than 3,000 or about 3,000 non-existent workers who had been on the payroll of PRASA, ghost employees. Why is this all happening? Where was that money going? PRASA is that entity where the commission had evidence that an investigator was an auditor, was trying to follow money that came from. By the time the commission finished its work, it didn't know where that money ended because the hawks stopped here. The effect and the impact to use trains. I can refer to other evidence in the commission. Denel is one of the entities that the commission well. It was run properly. It was respected internationally. And the chairperson of the board of Denel, which was in charge from Denel, was doing at that time. Then there was a new board in 2014, and then things changed. The commission's report deals with that. What type of people had been appointed there, and what happened. And of course we know it's workers. That's how workers are feeling the impact of corruption and state capture at Denel. I can refer you to the 1 billion rand, more than 500 houses were supposed to have been built. But in the end, which showed that more than 50 houses, to his knowledge, had been built. And yet, all the money had gone. The people who were supposed to be given houses were left without houses. I can refer you to where Mr. Sodi's company was given the job of removing asbestos from houses in the townships without any processes being followed. And more than 250 million rand removed. That's how corruption impacts on ordinary people. It affects their lives deeply. Commission, what happened at Transnet and what happened at Eskom. We know also what happened in the Free State, in the project Free State, who were supposed to have benefited from that project, were actually sidelined. We know how taxpayers' money was put 30 million rand into a company that had no experience in this type of job. That only had 16 rand in its bank account the previous day, has affected the people of South Africa. What happened at SAA is not something that happened overnight. It happened over a long period of were either asleep or were onto some other project, and they were not bothered by its decline year after year. Of course, until through corruption, millions of rands meant, and we do not care about the welfare and the interests of the people. Unfortunately, some of those who participate in corruption in our country are those who pretend to be dedicated. Is money that would have been used to build schools, clinics, hospitals, roads, bridges, and generally to ensure development have been used to pay reasonable salaries for nurses, doctors, police, and other employees in the public service. It is money that could have been used to assist unemployed graduates and start small businesses. In our country, we still have mud schools in rural areas. We still have many schools that have no laboratories. We have too many schools which have no proper toilets. We have too many schools which do not have qualified maths and science teachers. These very serious needs in our society. In volume 3 of part 6 of the Commission's report, the Commission detailed various amounts. Large amount reflects that an amount of over 57 billion rand was disbursed by organs of state in expenditure tainted by state capture. A complete breakdown is given in the report, and it was pointed out and Transnet. All this money could have been used for the benefit of the people of South Africa. One cannot talk about whistleblowers and about people who might not be whistleblowers in the true sense, but who made a significant contribution during the years that people who said no and risked losing their jobs and actually did lose their jobs. A serious dent on corruption. We need to ensure that whistleblowers and those people who stand for what is right in the face of serious attempts at corrupting them and getting them to take part, that if as a result of their efforts the country recovers money that has been taken away from the people of South Africa through corruption, that they get some percentage of it. That is part of what the Commission has recommended. Our constitutional democracy, our constitutional order. And allow me, Program Director, to read a quotation from a judgment of the Constitutional Court, which I think puts this better than I could have hoped to put it. That corruption threatens to fall at the knees virtually everything we hold dear and precious in our hard-won constitutional order. It blatantly undermines the democratic ethos the institutions of democracy, the rule of law, and the foundational values of our nascent constitutional project. The capacity of the state to fulfill its obligations to respect, protect, promote, and fulfill all the rights entrenched in the Bill of Rights. When corruption and organized crime flourish, sustainable development and economic growth are stunted. And in turn, the stability and security of the deleterious impact of corruption on societies and the pressing need to combat it concretely and effectively is widely acknowledged in public discourse, in our own legislation, in regional and international conventions, and in academic research. Corruption is a serious threat to our fundamental rights. Corruption compounds inequality in society. Corruption is a threat to society. Corruption must be fought wherever we see it. We must all come together to fight corruption and uproot it from society. And I quote, perhaps the fullest recital of the insidious scourge of corruption on society and the need to prevent and eliminate it is to be found in our own domestic legislation. The preamble to PRECA records that corruption and related corrupt activities undermine rights, the credibility of governments, the institution and values of democracy, and ethical values and morality. That is part of the impact that corruption has in our society. And it is important that all of us must realize that corruption is an enemy of all those who envisage a society corruption ensures that a few become rich at the expense of the collective. And say, when the commission started, one of the primary questions that I was alive to was that if at the end of the work of the commission was not able to come up with recommendations about what measures should be taken, the commission may have succeeded in doing, would not be enough. Because after the end of the work of the commission, and looking back at the revelations that were made, all of us should say, this should never, ever, but we must not mislead ourselves. We must not say it will never happen again when we don't have a clear plan that will make sure it doesn't happen again. We must never mislead ourselves and say it will never happen again if the foundation is there. We need to say, what are all of those things that made state capture happen, that facilitated it? Where did we go wrong? While it is important to point at certain people, we must also ask ourselves as individuals and as colleagues. We all saw at different times what was happening. we also, maybe one saw today, another one realized in a week's time, in a month's time, or the following year, but at some stage we became aware. Some of us could have done something. We must ask ourselves, what is it happen again? And the other question is whether if state capture were to happen, would we do the right thing? And on this, I would be very happy if Parliament is able to come out in due course and say, this is when we could have, but this time we will do things differently. Therefore, it won't happen again. That is very important. The ruling party also needs to ask itself questions. What is it that it should have done and didn't do, which enabled state capture to happen? The ruler stood up and very courageously told everybody about his conversation with one of the Gupta brothers when he said he was to be appointed as minister. And his evidence and the evidence of some of the people who were present amounted to saying, actually, he found no support. He found no support. 3 bosses of the State Security Agency approached the former president and the then Minister of State Security and said the Guptas must be investigated. They were not given an environment that allowed them to investigate. Maybe if they had been allowed, state capture might. Mr. Mandasha's evidence before the commission issued a recommendation to the NEC of the ruling party that President Zuma should step down because it's clear that they could see what was happening. That recommendation was ignored. And if it had not been ignored, maybe all of us need to say, what are the things that were not done right? What were the things that were done wrong? Would we be prepared and would we have the courage now to do the right thing? I will be very happy if Parliament were to nicely surprise me that if this was with how it happened previously. I was also asked, Program Director, to talk about the role of the judiciary in the context of the impact of corruption on society. I believe that this question foremost in the light of the primary role of the judiciary or the courts. The primary function of the courts and the judiciary is the adjudication of justiciable disputes. Therefore, the courts and the judiciary must carry out this function effectively and expeditiously as part of their fight against corruption. The expeditious confidence in society. In order for courts to do all of that, they must be adequately resourced in terms of judges, support staff, magistrates, tools of trade, and all necessary equipment. At the moment, there are many courts which have infrastructural challenges which need to be attended to. And vacancies must be filled as soon as possible so that courts will be able to rise to the occasion and play their role in the fight against corruption. Above all, the judiciary must adjudicate cases that come before the courts without fear, favor, or prejudice, and in accordance with their oath or affirmation of office. Members of the judiciary are captured by anybody, including corrupt elements in society. I know that there are some within society, our country, who like making unsubstantiated allegations that the judiciary is captured or that certain members of the judiciary are captured. The truth is that they've had about 4 years during the life of this evidence implicating a judge in corruption or state capture. A question may be asked what it means at a practical level to decide cases without fear, favor, or prejudice, and in accordance with our oath of office or affirmation. It means that A, we will not bend the law. It will be based on the Constitution, the law, and the evidence. The judiciary will not be scared to make unpopular decisions as long as those decisions are justified in terms of the Constitution, the law, and the evidence. We will not seek to enhance our popularity by giving outcomes for which we will be applauded when the Constitution, the law, members of the judiciary will grant bail to those accused persons who, in terms of the Constitution, the law, and the evidence before them, should be granted bail. Members of the judiciary will not refuse bail to any accused person who deserves bail because they will be unpopular, just because they will be unpopular if they released that accused on bail. Courts will sentence accused persons in accordance with accepted legal principles for sentencing. This is our pledge, and this is what we will do. In this way, we will play our part in the fight against corruption. We ask that everyone, including the legislature, against corruption. I do believe that with all of us working together, we have a chance of defeating corruption. I do believe that after the Commission has completed its task, we need to say, we're no longer going back. We will fight corruption. Yes, it might not be 100% free of corruption, because no country is completely free of corruption. But hopefully, one day, corruption in our country will be so insignificant that we will be justified in saying we have defeated corruption. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. We are inviting the Chief Justice to sign the pledge that we have signed earlier for the PSC. May I please invite the chairperson to accompany Chief Justice to sign the pledge.